The morning mist, like a gray, salt-soaked velvet, weighed down the surface of Boston Harbor. John Macaulay stood on the dock, leaning on an oak cane. The rubber pad on its end cast dark dots on the mossy wood. He gazed at the destroyer USS Yorktown at its berth, its bowsprit looming in the mist, like the bow of an aged beast with its head bowed. The salty sea breeze tugged at his graying hair. His right hand instinctively pressed against the titanium prosthesis, on his right leg a memento, from the battle in Kuwait 20 years earlier. The corners of the Boston Globe in his pocket were wrinkled, the front page headline glaring. USS Yorktown's power system outage for 3 weeks, naval engineers at their least. John walked along the dock, the clatter of his cane against the wood being especially clear in the morning mist. The hem of his faded windbreaker rose, revealing a well-worn sailor shirt beneath. Though the words USS Yorktown were faintly etched on the collar, his fingertips brushing against the frayed threads still evoked the smell of paint at Portsmouth Dockyard in 1997. A clang of metal rang out from the sentry box, and young Lieutenant Alan Cole pushed open the door and emerged, his service pistol dangling from its holster, his gold armband gleaming. "Stop!" He took 3 steps in front of John, his boot heels clicking. "Military restricted area? Didn't you see the sign?" John pulled out the polished stainless steel dog tag from around his neck. "Nose Engineer John Macaulay. I'd like to see what's wrong with you, old friend." Alan's eyes flickered from the tag to John's prosthetic leg, a sneer on his lips. "Isn't the Veterans Home paying enough?" He tapped his foot against the prosthetic, making a dull metallic sound. "This piece of junk can't fix a warship. Get out of here." The sentry chuckled from the guardhouse, his young face revealing a disdain for age. John clenched his cane, his knuckles white. He took a deep breath and turned to leave, the tapping of his cane much heavier than when he'd arrived. In the afternoon, John sat at his usual spot at the Sea Dog, his bourbon gleaming amber before him. Dave, the owner, wiped the bar with a black rag. "Don't take it personally. Those young guys don't know anything." John stared at a framed photo on the wall, a 1998 photo of the Yorktown, sailing through a Malacca Strait storm. He stood at the engine room console, his finger on the red emergency button. "It's a heart problem," he suddenly said, his voice burning with alcohol. "The steam valve on boiler number 3 has a design flaw. It cracks after every 5,000 hours of operation." Dave pushed a beer over. "How can you be sure? Even the naval experts can't pinpoint it." John used a toothpick to draw a piping diagram on the bar. "I installed it myself during the 1997 overhaul. I added a copper bushing to the valve seat. It should have lasted a few more years, but it would have masked the fault. Those young guys definitely didn't take it apart." That night, John dreamed of the Yorktown hurtling across the Pacific. Alarms blared amid the roar of the engines, and red warning lights illuminated every pale face. He woke with a start, his forehead covered in sweat, his right hand still gripping the wrench. "You kicked Macaulay out?" Rear Admiral Harris slammed the report onto the metal tabletop, shaking the air. Sunlight streamed through the porthole, slicing sharp glare across the metals on his chest. Alan's heels clicked on the floorboards. "That old guy isn't quite right. He's wearing a prosthetic leg." Harris sneered. "In 1998, when the boiler exploded, it was this old guy who crawled 30 meters in 800-degree heat to shut off the valves and save the entire ship. There's still 3 ounces of metal shards embedded in his prosthetic leg." He pointed to a group photo on the wall. "That's him in his youth." Alan's face was pale, his Adam's apple rolling, unable to speak. "Prepare the cars." Harris grabbed his military cap. "Take 2 squads to fetch Macaulay, and get the ceremonial uniforms." 3 cars flying Navy colors were parked at John's house. He was in the yard polishing his faded Navy cross. Harris stepped forward and saluted. "The boiler pressure is dropping 2 units per hour. The bomb disposal team has established a cordon. Please assist." John looked at the brand new chief engineer uniform, held by a sailor in the back seat of the car, and was silent for a moment. "Give me 10 minutes." John stepped aboard the Yorktown in his new uniform. The sea breeze whimpered through the portholes, as if recognizing a familiar scent. The sailors lined up on the deck, their eyes filled with respect. "Where's boiler number 3? His voice echoed through the corridor, his steps much more steady than at the dock. Alan followed behind, his collar dark with sweat. He tried to speak several times, but Harris's gaze stopped him. The engine room was filled with the smell of oil and steam. John took a deep breath and smiled. It's that same smell again. His fingertips brushed against the dusty control panel buttons, and memories from 20 years ago suddenly came alive. "Open the inspection cover." As the sailor used hydraulic pliers to remove the metal cover, everyone gasped. A hairline crack on the steam valve, oozing silvery steam. "See?" John pointed to the copper ring inside the valve seat. The bushing was added in 97. He took out a special wrench and knelt on the scorching deck, his body supported by his prosthetic limb. Sweat dripped onto the valve, making a hissing sound. Alan, watching this scene, finally realized that he had driven away the soul of the warship. 4 hours later, John tightened the last bolt. Try to start it. The chief engineer pressed a button, and the entire ship shook slightly. The engine's low roar grew into a deafening roar. The pressure gauges rose, and the green lights illuminated one by one. "Oh my God!" the young sailor whispered. Harris squeezed John's hand, his eyes welling. The deck erupted in cheers, and some shed tears. John watched the ship leave its berth. She can run for another 10 years. At the commendation ceremony, Harris pinned John with a new Navy Cross, and the sound of the crew's salutes was eardrum-wrenching. Alan stood at the front, his epaulets no longer covered in gold. "I apologize for my foolishness," he said, bowing deeply. John placed his old medal in his hand. "It's okay to make mistakes. Don't forget to respect those who know these seas better." The sunset dyed the sky red, and the Yorktown sounded 3 whistles. John stood at the bow, his white hair ruffled by the sea breeze, the clatter of his prosthetic limbs against the deck harmonizing with the roar of the engines. He knew he had never left. Some souls are born with steel, and some memories never rust. As the warship sailed into the Atlantic, his figure and the ship's shadow merged at the junction of sea and sky, forming an eternal bronze scroll.